Welcome back to the Creative Connection. As always, I am your host, Cyndi Thomsen. And this week's conversation is one I have been especially looking forward to. I first met Jacob Nordby through the Heal and Create community back in 2022. His work and his heart immediately struck a chord with me. As a writer, creative coach, and founder of Creativity on Bootcamp, and you'll have to correct me if that's wrong, Jacob. Jacob has guided thousands of people to rediscover their creative voice, not as a luxury, but as a lifetime. In a world where so often productivity over presence is encouraged, Jacob reminds us that creativity is one of the most powerful ways to come home to ourselves, to heal, to make meaning, and to remember what truly matters. So join us as we talk about creativity as a way to heal, how the simple act of expression can restore joy, awaken purpose, and help us reclaim the parts of ourselves we thought we had lost. So, Jacob, I first became of you when I literally happened upon the Heal and Create Writers Retreat in October of 2022. And I couldn't travel there, so I attended virtually. But I was instantly connected to and felt very resonant with you. What first led you to explore creativity, not just as expression, but as a way to heal, that Heal and Create title?
Well, I really appreciate joining you, Cyndi. So good to see you like this. You know, back in 2007 and 8, I had been following a path of, building a business, several businesses, and found myself deeply burnt out. My inner self, I didn't know the language back then, but my inner self was saying, hey, you're not on the right track. And when the 2008 mortgage crisis hit, it wiped me out, which was really painful and messy, but it was also this amazing gift. And Cyndi, I moved from where I live here in Boise. I moved to Austin, Texas with my then wife and 3 little kids. We didn't know anyone. We didn't have jobs, and we had just enough money to move. When I got there, I began remembering that I had had this dream as a child to be a writer. And so I got 2 or 3 part-time jobs. And one of them was this warehouse where I could sit quietly between box orders that I would carry back to the main office in the back of my car. And one day I picked up a copy of The Artist's Way that my father had lent me and took it with me to that office. And I was feeling so turned inside out and frightened, and my identity was in complete chaos. And I sat there and began reading that book, and tears started just flowing down my face. I felt so seen, as if she had written it just for me. Um, and then I began doing the work of it, the morning pages and all of it. And little by little, I found myself discovering some footholds, discovering a little bit of solid ground beneath my feet. So that's where it began for me, and began realizing that creativity wasn't a product. It's my essential life force. It's all of our life force. It's our animation. It's what gets us up, and it's what keeps us connected to life itself. And so that really began the process over the next 10 or 12 years of pulling these threads, following these clues that said there's more to creativity than our culture is telling us. There's some disconnect with how most of us see creativity. So yeah, that's where it really began in earnest for
So
me.
we have a connection there. So when I was 10, I desperately wanted to be in band or choir, not because I felt musical, but because that's where my friends were going to be. And I thought, well, everybody can do music, right? So, but back in the day, this was the early 70s in the Midwest, we had auditioned to be an either. So I did my choir audition first, and then I went to do the band audition. And at the end of the band audition, the band director left the room, came back and said, well, I'm sorry, we don't have any place for you. And I don't know how or why I asked the question, but I asked the question, why? And the band teacher said, because you're toned up and you should just be in the audience, which Yes, exactly. No teacher should say that to a child. And this is back before we really knew, right? But my mother was a school teacher. She happened to have been the union leader in the district. Of course, this teacher got a strong talking to from my mother, but my mother went on a quest to help me figure out whether it was the music that I was drawn to or whether there was something else about that part of our brain and our being that was important. And that's when I discovered I was a storyteller. And I like to take people like your
Yeah.
writing and bring it to life.
Mm,
So the stage has primarily been my background, but I also have done some film and some TV. But what I find interesting is I decided to put that
mm,
on hold when I got to be 18 or 19 because it became too difficult. The world said, you can't make any
mhm,
money at that. Why are you doing that? That's just for fun. You know, that and
mm,
I'm sure you probably heard that language as
mhm,
well. You're not going to make any money at that. That's just for fun. And I happened upon
mhm,
the artist way after the birth of my second son. And that helped me. So, Julia, there's a strong
mm,
connection there with the artist way, no matter what kind of artist you are, that creative spirit that I believe is in all of us, and we can use it in whatever way
mhm.
we want, but it's there and we have to honor it. So there's that connection right there. I think that we both have, and
Yes.
what Julia has done so brilliantly is helped us learn how to honor that, I think. Yeah. So
Mhm.
as you think about yourself now in
I
this
agree.
season of your life,
Yeah.
and we all are in different seasons of our life as we evolve and become and find new circles and new places to be and new expressions. What does this quote that I found of yours, that creativity isn't about making art, it's about making yourself whole. What does that mean to you now? Maybe as you look back at the person you were, and maybe as you're looking forward to the person we are becoming, what does that mean?
Well, I feel like it taps into some Jungian um, teachings, maybe not intentionally, but definitely that's some of the foundation of it, which says that becoming ourselves is the greatest privilege of a lifetime, you know? And what I find, Cyndi, is and lived through and still live through at times is that there's this
Mm.
tremendous pressure in our society to abandon who we really are over and over again, you know? And so what happens when we honor our creative spirit and really tune into it is that we begin to take back the driver's seat and we begin to realize that this life that we're experiencing and expressing is our greatest creative project. So many people get bound up because the society says your creative projects are the products, and the way that they're received, whether they become bestsellers or hit a top chart or something, that tells us whether that creativity, the product, is valuable or not. I see that as one of our greatest downfalls in our society right now, and has been for a long time, but it's especially so right now. And it's what keeps a lot of people from ever tuning in. So I love to invite people into saying what comes from becoming who you really are. I love that you keep using the word becoming. What comes
Mm.
from the becoming is going to be beautiful. It will be unique. In fact, one of the simplest definitions of the word creativity is the process by which something rare, original, and valuable is formed. And so I love to invite people into realizing that that's not the product. It can be, it will be, but the first project we have is finding out who we really are and becoming more of that. And from that beingness
Yeah.
will come genuinely
You know,
original,
it's
rare, and
interesting. We
valuable
don't sometimes
products,
realize,
items.
and you've probably had this experience as well, how much impact we can have on another person or community when we allow that part of us that's inside to
Mhm.
come out. A couple of years ago, I was directing a production, a rather large production of Mary Poppins. And I decided to do it a little differently, meaning I chose a theme that I communicated to the cast and crew that this is the theme, and that is about family. And what is family? Family is love. And we all have our own family, whether it's our biological family or not, it doesn't matter. And the other unique thing I do is I cast people that would not, in a regular setting, maybe be cast because they have something that is atypical of what we consider quote unquote normal. And I didn't realize the impact that those two things would have
Yeah.
on not only the cast and crew, but the audience as a whole. And this is one of those times
Mm,
that you get something fed back to you that you have no idea, right? So I got this letter from a parent that was a parent of someone in the cast. And then I got a very similar letter from someone who was not in the cast that said, I love how you have cultivated a community of love through the art of story. Thought about that. I thought, what a healing
mm,
thing that is. So now I've been not conscious of, but aware of. I like to use presence and awareness as my driver for things rather than consciously saying, okay, I'm going to go over here and do this, but to be present to what's happening. So as you think about that story I shared and you think about that idea of what happens when we allow it to show up. And I think about something that I either read that you wrote or I heard that you say about returning to creative innocence and about how that allows a person maybe to create a place of honesty,
mm.
to create a shift. And I think that's really what I was doing when I was directing that production is I was very innocently saying, I really want the idea of love and I want the idea of family to come out. And I laid it on the table for them to do. So, what does that say to you when
Mhm.
someone comes from that place of creative innocence and something happens? And maybe it's happened for you that you have a story to share about something.
Yeah. Well, I love that creative innocence and the idea that we can return to a place before the harm, which for a lot of people can go back maybe even before they were fully self aware. In my work with people, I've had to learn how many have had early childhood experiences that even before they knew the words for it, left them feeling cut
Mm,
off from their life, left them feeling cut off from joy, from innocence, even. So I'm careful to acknowledge that nowadays. But um, there is that place in us that knows. And innocence, well, it reminds me of most of the wisdom traditions, Cindy, the Taoist, Buddhist, Christians, many of them talk about recovering the student's mind, the beginner's mind, unless you
mm,
become like a little child again. So it means that we don't know. It- Returning to that creative innocence says, I don't know. I don't know what all the names or the rules for things are. I don't know what this will look like when I'm done with it. And you asked for a story. I mean, there's so many, but anytime I've embarked upon the process of writing a book, for example, there's this not knowing. And, much like even the process we're engaged in right now, no, you have some outlines and you have some plans, but you're also so aware that we can't control exactly what shape it will take as we trust being in this improv moment together, right? And I think that experience, I think people, you're a person on stage, so no doubt and have experienced improv a lot. Like the magic that happens when we let ourselves break out of this is how it's supposed to turn out, and we say, I'm going to trust my impulse, my
mhm,
creativity, my originality in this moment to be what will actually show up rather than a preformed idea. Now we've stepped over that line of certainty and now we're in the unknown, but that's where all original things are created,
mm,
is in the unknown. Because what's inside the known, which our ego minds love, it loves certainty, it loves knowing how things will turn out, how they'll be received. When we step across that line into the unknown, there's uncertainty, which is why there's often
mm,
resistance in all of us to step outside of it. If you've ever watched an artist or a writer, let's say a recording artist, a musician, when they break from what made them popular and they write new stuff, or a writer writes in an entirely new
Mm.
genre, we're watching them stay alive, creatively
Yeah,
speaking.
yeah, yeah. That just that sparks something in me that um the question around, because people that I work with, the creatives that I work with, they talk about this wall that magically appears when they try something new. And that wall is resistance. It's the push and the pull of us on our
Mm,
path of becoming. One of my favorite quotes um is from Shakespeare, and it was one of the very first plays I ever saw, which was all the world's a stage, and all the men and women merely players, each knowing their own entrance and exit. And that can be taken one of two ways. Either it's the prescribed entrance and exit that the society tells us that we should be taking, or it's the ability to step back and ask ourselves, is this my entrance, or is this my entrance? And then to say, I don't know, and take that moment of pause and wait
mhm,
for the answer, because the answer will
mhm.
show up. So
Yeah.
when you work with someone and they're trying to reconnect to or uncover the hidden creativity that they have, and this idea of the push pull, and is this the right path to take? And I know how I work with people. I'm curious how you go through that process with some.
Well, I don't usually
Mhm,
make the
mhm,
framework visible, Cindy, but I've come upon a process, and the first part of the
mhm,
process is self-discovery. Who am I? Um, and I loved what you said at the beginning of the episode. You talked about the season of life we're in. So frequently, I'm sitting with someone who is feeling resistance. They're wanting to become creatively renewed in some way, which might be just stated as, I want to feel alive again. I want to feel connected to my life. So even that, using that word creative or creatively sometimes becomes a block for people. So if we even simplify it from there, I
mm,
want to feel my life again. So self discovery, who am I? And then what comes from self discovery is self acceptance. We begin to, you mentioned Enneagram earlier and your fascination with that. I love that. And that's one of the programs I'll often use with people who are going to do longer term work with me is we'll go and we'll get an
mhm,
Enneagram, we'll get the Myers Briggs, we'll look at maybe Strengths Finder, variety of these things. I love overlaying them because what happens is when people are able to look in that mirror, Cindy, and it feels like a gentle mirror reflecting back to them. This is who
mhm,
you are. These things you thought were weaknesses and flaws, these are actually part of your makeup. And this is how you can invite those orphan parts
mm,
home. And as those orphan parts come home, we begin to have this tremendous satisfaction that begins to develop that says, I belong here. I'm
mm,
acceptable. What happens then, Cindy, is we have this experience of learning more about who we are, which, as you well know, is an ongoing forever process. We need to keep on that path for as long as we live, because as long as we live, we will grow and we will change, we will transform. But what happens as we begin to find out more about who we are, we accept that beautiful,
mm,
knobby, unique self. Creative expression, then, self expression becomes as natural as breathing because it's no longer being forced. It's no longer even a goal out there on the horizon. It's more of, this is how I
right.
am living. This is how I am alive inside of my life. And so often with people, when they come and they say something like, I'm so blocked, I need someone to kick my ass, I need someone to hold me accountable, I'll say, listen, why don't we start with being gentle
Mm,
and curious about what you feel is blocking you? I have a client, a new one later today, that I'm confident we'll end up going through parts of this conversation. So rather than take the approach like Stephen Pressfield in some of his books, which I really enjoy, but some of them can be quite pugilistic. You need to smash resistance. You need to, it can be very sort of militant, which can at times be useful. But what I found often, Cindy, is more useful. I'm curious to hear what your experience of this is, but What is more useful is often to step back from trying to smash the invisible block in the pathway and ask its name. Who are you? What do you need? What are you trying to tell me? And some of this has its roots
Mhm.
in internal family systems and other modalities. But I love doing that because what we find then is people lose people lose the
Mm,
mantra that I'm so lazy, I'm so blah blah blah, whatever the thing is, that self reproach. They begin to get curious, like, oh,
mhm.
really? That's where that block is coming from, and then we can begin to untangle it. We can actually find the jewel, the
Mm,
treasure
yeah,
inside of that
yeah.
block rather than just trying to get rid of it.
It's there's 3 things that popped into my head while I was listening. The idea about belonging. Belonging is so important, but it starts with belonging to ourself first. And then I
Yeah.
thought a picture popped in my head actually of Julia
Yes.
and her little inner critics
Yeah.
that she puts in a circle and says, "You know what? I understand where you're coming from, but right now I need to work. I'll come back to you later." And I have another person that I
Yeah.
work with personally as a coach who said, "It is okay to say to that little thing that's popping up is, I understand that you feel this is important," because quite often it has to do with our ego and it has to do with some part of ourselves that needs attention. But if you can just say, "I understand you, I see you, but right now I need to take control and move in this direction. I will come back to you." But befriending and allowing the belonging and the honoring of all parts
Yeah.
of ourselves. So when I am working with someone, usually they come to me because
Yes.
they have something they believe is broken in their life, and that's what's causing them to not be able to think the way they want to
Yeah.
think, which could or could not be. If it's really truly broken and they need that kind of guidance, they go to my husband, who's the clinical psychologist. But if it's something that needs to be uncovered in a different manner, maybe it's a story, maybe it's a picture, maybe it's just getting their mind straight. So
Mhm.
then it becomes a journey with that person on what brings you joy. And if they can only think of one thing, then do that as much as you possibly can. And within that, find out what within that also brings you joy. Maybe it's a
Yeah.
walk. I'm on a walk today and oh my, the birds. So now that's the second thing that brings you
Yes.
joy and sort of stacking the joy things by doing that. The things that we don't enjoy or the things that we use and I hate this word, that word right there, the hate language, then seems to disappear and become less and less. And then it's more about what I find joy in and what I appreciate and what I
Yeah.
have gratitude for. And then learning to say, I am grateful. I
Yes.
am grateful we had this conversation. I am grateful that I saw you today. I'm grateful. And by changing that language a little bit, then we get at, the name of my business is Creating a Passionate Life, and I
Mhm.
chose that for a reason. I want to help people create the life that they are passionate about living. They see that and they go, "Oh, I don't love my life. I want that." And then it becomes a conversation about what the parts are that they are having a challenge with and how can we reframe that? Or if it's truly something that is a challenge, then the question becomes,
Mhm.
why are you doing it? Why do you keep doing it if it's not something you enjoy or if it's something that is bringing you down? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So when you hear that, what comes up
Right.
for you when you hear that?
Yeah, I love that, Cindy. Well, you're talking about, I feel like, I mean, Julia would call it a creative recovery, you know? It's really remembering. Yeah. And, this year has been an interesting one for me. So, with full transparency, I stepped away from a major project that had it consumed a lot of my energy and I loved it. And my inner self eventually said, You really need to come back home.
Mhm.
You're too out there at the moment, too scattered and for too long. And God, that's been a difficult thing, Cindy, to allow that to happen because I'm a doer. I love to create things and put things together, and but I've been going and doing for too long and for too with too much intensity. And so this year I've actually had to spend an awful lot of time with exactly what you're talking about, slowing way down, um, looking
Yeah.
for um, looking for the moments, the glimmers, looking for the small bursts of joy. And when I'm riding along on a really high tide of energy and accomplishment and things are happening, that can sometimes um, become out of date, and that was interesting for me this year to really have to listen to that inner self that said it's time to step back and create some space here. And my ego did not like that at all. And so I love what you just shared about the actual process. Sometimes people think I'll never get
Mm,
there because there is this destination. But what you talked about just now, what came up for me is you're talking about realizing there's nowhere else to be. And to look down, I love to
yeah.
say, what look down where our feet are standing on the path, and then look what's within my own arm's
Mm,
reach right now. What wants to be tended? What wants to be loved? What wants to be healed? That's where I find my ability to come back to life because of frequently when I feel completely depleted or angry or scared is because I'm
mm,
not taking care
yeah.
well of what's within
Yeah.
my own arm's reach, Cindy.
There's so much in that. We could probably go on for hours if we continue like this, but what presented itself in that moment with what you shared is something that I don't think a lot of us give ourselves space to do, and that is to say, I am done with that now, and it is time to let go. It is time to walk away from this.
Yeah.
It's interesting. You bring that up, and then I'm reflecting in my life about the times where usually because of something negative that happened that caused, I being an 8, caused me to get angry, and I walked away, and I literally would walk there are 5
Hmm.
jobs that I can think of that I walked out the door, left people in shock, but never went back, and I don't regret any one of them, but then there are the ones I did not walk away from that caused some resistance in what was
Hmm.
trying to come up and that I wasn't being open to paying attention to. So that leads me to a question. What have you learned about the relationship between that vulnerability to walk away or stay and the creative process?
Well, I think what you're describing, I just love the way you framed that, Cindy. I think what you're describing is really what we talked about a bit earlier about stepping outside of certainty and into the unknown. And again, a lot of people assume that creativity is meant to be expressed in projects, but it's also meant to be expressed with how we'll recreate life when we step out of a form that is no longer serving us. And I, about 13 years ago, stepped out of a marriage that I'd been in for almost 20 years, and it damn near killed me. It was
Mhm,
really hard. It pushed back against all of my tendencies, my caregiving, my soft control freakery, all the things. And the fact is, I was presented with a choice, and the way it showed up for me at the time, Cindy, was if
mhm,
you're at a crossroad, you've been feeling this crossroad coming for years and years, because I had. If you turn left, you're headed back into the known. That means you're going to keep getting what you is very familiar. It's not where your heart's calling you. It's not, it's never been this
mhm,
connection that's been enlivening, but it's known. And if you turn right, you're turning into the unknown, which means you don't know how this will be. You have no guarantee that this will turn out well, that it will certainly not be comfortable. But I remembered back when Wayne Dyer talked
it's
about how the ego
safe.
wants to keep us in stasis. It wants the status quo because that's its job. It's certain, exactly. It's safe. And he said the ego will keep us even in mild discomfort or mild misery forever if we allow it to, because its job is to create certainty rather than step into something new and original. And so that's one example, and a pretty intense one of realizing that life is my art. And if I wish to have the full and original experience of life, I have to be willing at times to step out of
Yeah.
forms, whether it's a job or a relationship or a way of being, whatever it might be. Sometimes we are recalled to step out of that into something new. And that is an amazing creative opportunity, even though
Oh,
that
it's
sounds
scary
tidy
as
when often
heck.
it's frightening and messy.
It's scary as heck. Yeah. 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 So, our time is drawing to a close, but I have a couple
Yeah.
of,
Yeah.
additional sort of things that I'm curious about. If creativity is a way to heal, and whether it is the act of healing is the creative part or the creativity is the healing part, it could
Hmm.
be interchangeable, in my opinion. For
Mhm.
anyone who might be listening, what's one small act that someone could try today to try to reconnect to their essential self is more or less what we've been talking about. What do you think? What is one small
Yes. Oh, God, I love this question. Um, so a lot of people aren't journalers, but I would love to offer everyone this very
Mm,
short, simple process of, and I love to call it rather than journaling, it's talking to yourself, um, listening to yourself. And I have a little process called the Creative Self Journal, and it's a free download if they want to go to creativeselfjournal.com. But what
mhm,
it is, Cindy, because on there I have a little ebook and what have you they can have for free. What I love though is it's asking these three questions, and your listeners can
mm,
do this right now without downloading anything. The first question is, how do I feel right now?
mm,
Second question is, what do I need right now? And the third question, I'm going to come back and talk about those first two in just a minute. Third question is, what would I love to create right now? Or sometimes if I'm going through a time of emotional struggle or turmoil, it's easier to ask, how would I love to feel right now? But let's go back to those first two questions. And with your experience and your husband as a clinical psychologist, I know that you're familiar with this, but the truth is, most of us learned and internalized the message from a very early age that my how I feel doesn't matter, uh, my needs don't matter. And so the act of asking ourselves each day, how do I feel right now? That brings us back into our bodies. It also brings us back into the present moment. It
mm.
sends a signal to that inner self that says, I matter. How I feel matters. And being able to be honest about that on paper for 5 or 10 minutes a day, Cindy, is for me, it's a lifeline. It's something I do every single day. How do I feel right now? Oh, and often, many of us were taught to mask our feelings. We're taught to change how we presented to the world so that we could be acceptable, we'd fit in, we'd belong. And that sends the signal to our inner self that says, how I really am, how I really feel isn't likely acceptable. It doesn't have a place here. And so that's a process of asking and answering those questions that begins to heal that relationship, that connection to who we really are. What do I need right now? Oh, yeah. Oh, I need a nap. Sometimes the answers surprise me with being very
Mhm.
prosaic. I need a nap. I need a drink. I need to go pee. And then often it goes into more existential, right? So, yeah, if you asked what's a simple act, I would say if you can sit down and ask yourself those questions for about 5 or 10 minutes, just right now, just today, and pay attention to the answers, no matter how simple or complex they might seem.
Well, the whole reason why I started this podcast was so that we could reclaim our voice, reignite our vision, and realign with what matters most in our life. And I think you hit on that with your journaling prompts. That is a
Hmm.
perfect segue for all of us.
Mhm.
So, Jacob, as we finish up here, I'm wondering what's next for you? Where can people find your work and how can they join a creative community that you might have?
Probably the easiest way at the moment is just go over to jacobnordby.com, um, and subscribe. I will make sure that everyone knows about new projects. I'm working on an exciting one right now to launch soon. It's called How to Become a Transformational Workshop Leader. So this is my
I
first
might have
time
to
of
participate in
yeah.
that.
It's my first time of actually, creating a thing to help teachers and healers and guides, improve their impact and reach. So I'm really excited about that, Cindy, and it's brand new for me. So I'm in that whole stage of creative uncertainty and all that. So it's I wouldn't say it feels good, but it feels exciting. Thanks for asking.
Wonderful, wonderful. So much, Jacob. I loved our conversation today. Such a beautiful reminder that creativity isn't just about what we make, it's about what we heal and who we become in the process. I will include the journaling link as well as Jacob's website information in the show notes. And as a reminder, if this episode sparks something in you, a quiet longing to reconnect with your own creativity and sense of purpose, I invite you to join me for the Winter Rooted in You Circle. We will begin on January 3rd, and while that seems like a long way off, that 6-week journey gives you the opportunity to pause with purpose and intention, realign, and return to what truly matters for you. I am offering early bird registration now through November 15th at a special reduced rate. And I'm adding 2 bonus one-on-one coaching calls that you can have between now and the time we begin on January 3rd. I'm excited. Next week, I'm going to take this conversation from inner creativity to creative courage. As I have shared my journey of storytelling and wanting to be a professional actor and working with actors, I am inviting my friend Jem Wiltshire, managing director of Hollywood Access Inc., to come on live with me next Friday, November 7th at 5 p.m. Pacific. We will dive into what it really takes to move forward as an actor in the industry, where talent meets bravery and visibility begins from within with a little help. Until then, may you stay rooted in your own creativity, be connected to your courage, and open up to the chapter of your own story and listen for what your heart and soul is calling you to. Until next week, I hope you have a fabulous